at the level of municipalities. I should explain here that municipalities in South Africa are composed like the German Bundestag, that is, they are half proportional representation and half elected from wards.
Okay.
Now you do get individuals standing in wards and sometimes winning. You also get a number of very small local associations who exist only in one town or one ward who do stand and win, but of course lack the financial resources to campaign at the level of a province or nationwide. So in that way, parties do occur in the Constitution. They also occur through parliamentary procedure. No member of Parliament may speak in Parliament unless the chief whip of that party has put that MP's name on the list handed to the Speaker, and the Speaker of the House will recognise MPs not by those who put their arms up like children in a classroom, but in sequence of the names on the list handed by the ruling and opposition parties in that way. So there too, the political parties do have a constitutional mention or procedure, and the same applies at the provincial and the municipal levels. I should also mention that South Africa is not a federation, it is a unitary state, in that the national government can overrule a province or a municipality on any issue whatsoever that it deems important to it. The statutory jargon for this is known as concurrent competency. It appears in the schedule to the Constitution there. So the essence of a federation, that a province can reject the policy of a national government and implement exactly the opposite policy. That does not apply to South Africa.
A province is a purely administrative district, then?
Yes. Well, they are more than purely administrative in that, for example, the Democratic Alliance runs the Western Cape province and the City of Cape municipality, and they do implement, of course, their own priorities and policies, and the government permits that. It has not been a matter of like racialism or something that the Constitution will forbid. The province has the right to take over a municipality that has collapsed in corruption and has become dysfunctional. I think in certain states in the USA, the state governor has the right to do that for a municipality that has collapsed in corruption. For example, Detroit in the state of Michigan.
Flint also.
Sorry?
Flint.
Flint. Oh yes. However, under Section 100 of the Constitution, the national government has the right to take over a province that has fallen into dysfunctionality or collapse. Now in the USA, that has not been done since Reconstruction, and it would require either proclaiming a state of emergency or a statute of Congress. I'm not sure which one. If, for example, the Obama administration was to take over the running of a Republican-led state in that way. Now here, you have had cases where the national government has taken over provincial departments in both the Limpopo province and in the Eastern Cape, where they collapsed due to corruption, bureaucrats stealing the money for school feeding, or fell into dysfunctionality. However, the national and provincial governments have never abused this authority to cheat the opposition parties out of a win they have had. They have been used against, in fact, ANC-run provinces and ANC-run municipalities where corruption reached the extreme level that the municipality collapsed, or where the functioning of administration collapsed due to incompetent persons being appointed through a spoil system to posts that they completely lacked the ability to be. I should add here that the reason the spoil system is much more serious in its consequences for South Africa than in the USA is that in the USA, both Republicans and Democrats have an inexhaustible supply of lawyers among their supporters they can appoint to any post. Now, by contrast, many of the persons appointed to bureaucratic posts in municipalities and provinces have not got more than grade 12 in South Africa. And when such persons are appointed as manager of a sewage plant or to running the procurement supply system or to running financial services, disaster follows in its wake within years. And that is why the spoil system is much more serious for South Africa than in the USA.
It sounds like a lot of the other problems boil down to educational problems in South Africa.
Clearly, South Africa does have a huge lack of tertiary qualified persons at the university level compared to the USA. What made this vivid for me in my Fulbright year, 2010, was it was then announced that the number of Americans in the 18, 19, 20, 21 year old cohort who had gone to university or college was at an all-time high. It was half of all young persons in the USA. Now, that was stunning to a South African, because here our youth unemployment in 18, 19, 20 year olds is half, 50%. And if we had the resources to give bursaries and scholarships to them, so that half of all our 18, 19, 21 year olds who are at university or college, indeed our unemployment rate would drop to US levels immediately, and there would be huge benefits to the economy, especially if they were at the community college level, learning trades such as electrician, plumber, and the various other artisanal trades there.
Well, of course, part of the success of the American tertiary education system is the large numbers of immigrant professors, to the point of being a real cultural cliche in the United States. There's even a Disney cartoon character. I don't know if you know Professor Ludwig von Drake, but he has a very thick German accent and wild feathers for hair.
Einstein.
Yeah, that's Einstein is a real life case of that. But we had actually in the history department at UCLA, we had a Dr. Funkenstein. I'm not making this up. That was his name. But the university faculties are full of immigrant professors. They try to get the best people from around the world. I've been told there's pressure in South Africa to get rid of foreign professors, in fact. How are you going to solve this problem if you don't open up?
Certainly, if you want the best in the world, that's going to mean that a high proportion of your university academics will be foreigners. I have had it quoted by a university friend that at Cambridge in the United Kingdom 55% of all academics are foreigners, and at Oxford 45% of all academics are foreigners. Now here, for about the first decade of democracy, there was no problem in foreigners lecturing at university. Subsequently to that, the Department of Home Affairs has insisted a university prove there is no South African who is capable of the job, and the test is capability rather than the best in the world. This has meant the universities have faced enormous bureaucratic fights of paperwork and hiring lawyers to hire foreigners in the humanities or in education. The University of the Western Cape, for example, has no problems in that we have a Chinese professor of geohydrology or hydrogeology. We have quite a Russian diaspora, in fact, in fuel cells and similar topics in the sciences and engineering, including Ukrainians. I suppose you can no longer call them Russians anymore. And there's a specific government exemption for astronomers, interestingly enough. You're completely free to hire the best astronomers in the world. And in fact, as I talk, the director of the South African Astronomical Observatory, meaning all observatories in the country, is Ted Williams, an American who immigrated, because as he says, astronomy budgets are shrinking in the USA. In South Africa, they're growing over there. So there are those constraints. The other constraint is through the affirmative action statute. The affirmative action statute defines as a designated group persons who were discriminated against before 1990 or their parents. So what this means is that, for example, employing Africans from Nigeria or Kenya does not count under affirmative action because those persons were not discriminated against as they did not live in South Africa before 1990. And since, for example, universities are under pressure that they should raise through future appointments the percentage of black African South Africans up to 80%, it means that foreigners are not black South Africans or the descendants of black South Africans who lived there before 1990. So they are, in effect, universities are restricted to a quota in effect by these measures. It will be difficult for a South African university today to have more than, say, roughly 1/10 or 1/5 of its academic staff being foreigners of it all there. On students, the government welcomes students from the west of Africa to our universities, and the government has announced that the subsidy it pays per student a year to South Africans will apply to students from other Southern African Development Community countries. That is 14 countries, all the Africans on the map going right up to Democratic Republic of the Congo and Tanzania, which are on the equator. Those students, the government will pay half their fees if they come to our universities. And at the University of the Western Cape, in practice, the university has chosen not to charge students more who come from any country in Africa, right up to Morocco and Egypt, over there. Foreign students would pay double the normal fees because, of course, the government is not paying half of their fees. So that's the situation with regard to foreigners at our universities.
Curiously, in the United States, there are no national universities, and the extra fees apply to students from other states at state universities. But I think I've totally run out of questions.
Well, here you see the Constitution defines grade schools, as Americans call them, as a provincial competency, but it defines universities and colleges as a national competency.
Right.
I should add also that when I say South Africa is not a federation, the Constitution does build in protection to provinces and municipalities against financial victimization by a government to prevent a national government from victimizing provinces and municipalities which vote for other political parties. For example, what happens in South Africa, unlike the USA, almost all taxes are collected nationally, not provincially at the municipal level, but there's a very stringent formula laid down for the government to allocate every province's share of the budget from the national treasury. It goes by a set amount per capita with a sliding scale for the poorest province and for the most rural province, because infrastructure costs more bringing electricity and piped water to rural areas than to urban areas. But this protects any province which votes against the ruling party, for example the Western Cape, from losing any cash in this way. So it hasn't consequences. The provinces, interesting enough, they do have the right to levy certain taxes, but interestingly the Democratic Alliance has chosen not to use those powers. That's because, of course, it's very unpopular among voters to raise taxes.
Always is.
Over there, and they would hesitate to do that. But they could. I should also mention, compared to the USA, we do escape two financial horror stories of United States politics. Detroit consists of 20 municipalities, and Los Angeles, I think, consists of over 15 municipalities. Now what this means is that the poor pay for the poor, and that every middle class precinct is a separate municipality, and thus the black schools and the black firefighters, the black clinics and the public health system are catastrophically underfunded. There's some federal aid. Now, by contrast, in South Africa, the money to every grade school is allocated nationally. Similarly, I was told that there's one place in the United States there is national income tax, state income tax, municipal income tax, school district income tax, and firefighter district income tax. Now in South Africa, the money for schools is allocated nationally. The money for fire brigade